Why God delays the rise of His strongest chosen ones until 30, it doesn't make sense at first. You feel the calling early. You feel the fire in your chest when you're young, maybe even as a child. You know deep down that you're different, marked, set apart. You see things others don't. You ask questions others are afraid to ask. You feel energies, patterns, shifts in people and environments before they even occur. It's not just intuition. It's spiritual knowing. It's divine wiring. And yet, nothing seems to happen. You wait. You grind, you try, you fail. You rise, you fall again. You wonder if you got it all wrong. Maybe you weren't chosen after all. Maybe you just imagined it. But then something strange happens when you approach the age of 30. The atmosphere around your life begins to change. The silence starts to crack. The patterns start to make sense. The pain begins to feel like preparation. And the purpose that once whispered now begins to roar. That's when you realize God didn't forget about you. He was delaying you on purpose, not to punish you, but to shape you, because the strongest chosen ones are never released early. They're hidden, held back, not because they're weak, but because they're too powerful to be released unrefined. We think purpose is about arrival, but to God, purpose is about readiness. And readiness is never built in the spotlight. It's built in the shadows. That's why the strongest chosen ones don't rise in their teens or early 20s. That's when the ego is still too loud. That's when identity is still too fragile. That's when we still crave validation more than impact. So God hides us, not out of cruelty, but out of protection. He lets others rise first. He lets them shine while we're still in the cave. And it burns. It feels unfair. It feels like falling behind. But we're not behind. We're being tempered. The delay is the design. Because when you're called to carry a heavy mantle, you need deep roots. And deep roots take years to grow beneath the surface, where no one claps, where no one sees, where no one understands why.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
Look at the pattern. It's everywhere. Jesus didn't begin his public ministry until 30. David was anointed as king in his youth, but didn't take the throne until years later after betrayal, wilderness, and hiding in caves. Joseph was given a vision as a teenager, but didn't step into authority until after betrayal, slavery, and prison. Why? Because divine power without divine maturity is dangerous. If God released you too early, your gift would outpace your character. Your power would exceed your wisdom, and you'd destroy yourself with the very calling that was meant to elevate you. This is why you felt the delay so deeply, because you're not average. You're not called to do what everyone else is doing. You're not built for surface-level impact. You're called to shift dimensions. You're called to awaken generations. And that kind of calling can't be microwaved. It can't be rushed. It has to marinate in pain, in silence, in obscurity. Because it's not just about what you're going to do, it's about who you're becoming in the process. God is more interested in your internal infrastructure than your external influence. So he will take his time with you. He will strip you down to nothing. He will let you walk through heartbreaks that feel senseless. He will allow betrayals that cut you to the bone. He will let you taste failure over and over again. And then Just when you think it's over, He will rebuild you from the inside out. And that is when the rise begins. But here's the hard part. Most people don't make it through the delay. They give up in the wilderness. They trade their calling for comfort. They try to force doors open before their time. And when nothing seems to work, they assume God changed His mind. But He didn't. He was waiting for you to change. He was waiting for your motives to purify, your identity to stabilize, your ego to shrink. Because when you rise at 30, you're not rising for applause. You're rising for assignment. You're not looking for validation. You're carrying revelation. You're not chasing attention. You're governing atmospheres. That's a different level, one that requires a different process. And I know it's hard. I know what it's like to feel late to your own life, to scroll through timelines and see people younger than you doing what you know you're called to do, to feel like God's holding you back while others are being celebrated. But what if I told you their rise is not your reference point? What if I told you they're not ahead, they're just earlier? And there's a difference. Some people peak fast and fade, but you were designed to last. Some people rise on hype, but you're being built on heaven's timeline, and heaven doesn't rush greatness. So I ask you, can you trust God's pace even when it doesn't match your plan? Can you surrender your timeline in exchange for your true timing? Can you let go of the need to be seen now so you can be prepared to be unstoppable later? Because when God finally says now, it won't be a slow rise, it'll be a sudden shift, a divine eruption, an opening of doors you didn't even knock on. And when that moment comes, you'll realize it wasn't a delay, it was divine incubation. And the version of you who emerges on the other side of 30 will be so spiritually sound, so deeply rooted, so wildly effective, that the world won't just notice, it will never be the same. The crushing before the crowning. Why God breaks you to build you before 30. There's a hidden ceremony that happens in the lives of the chosen, one that no one claps for, one that never goes viral. It's not held in the spotlight, it's not broadcast from stages, and it's not celebrated by the world. It's the crushing, the sacred breaking, the divine unraveling of everything you thought you were, everything you thought you needed, everything you once believed made you strong. This is why God delays the rise of His strongest chosen ones until 30, because before the crown there must be a cross. Before the influence there must be inner fire. And that fire can't be learned from books or sermons or even mentors. It comes from being broken open by the weight of your own calling. If you're walking through that season now, you know exactly what I mean. You've lost things you thought would last forever. You've been betrayed by people you loved with your whole heart. You've had dreams die slowly in your hands, and you couldn't do anything but watch. And you probably asked yourself, why is this happening to me? Why is God allowing this pain? But what if the pain isn't punishment? What if it's preparation? What if the breaking isn't to destroy you, but to extract the real you, the you that can carry the weight of your purpose without collapsing under it? See, God doesn't crown people who haven't been crushed, because the crushing does something supernatural. It purifies your intentions. It kills the version of you that needed the spotlight, that needed validation, that would have used the platform to fill the holes in your soul. God will never give you a crown to cover your wounds. He'll take you through the fire until the wound becomes wisdom, until the trigger becomes testimony, until the pain becomes power. That's what happens before 30. That's why everything feels like it's falling apart, because God is building you from the inside out. The world raises leaders based on charisma, but God raises leaders based on character, and character isn't built in comfort, it's built in chaos, in silence, in the nights when no one checks in the months when nothing makes sense, in the years when all you have is a whisper and a wounded heart. That's where God digs the wells. That's where He forges your discernment. That's where He teaches you to hear His voice above your doubt. And when you learn to trust Him in the dark, you will never again be shaken by the noise of the world. So many people want the crown, but don't want the crushing. They want the stage, but not the silence. They want the breakthrough, but not the breaking. But if you've been chosen, you don't get the luxury of skipping the process. You don't get to bypass the wilderness, because it's in the wilderness that you discover what you really believe. It's where God strips away the layers you built to protect yourself, the people-pleasing, the pride, the need to perform. And when those layers fall away, what's left is pure, what's left is real. What's left is you, the version that's ready to be crowned. And here's the secret few talk about. The crushing is not a one-time event. It's a rhythm, a cycle. Every new level of elevation requires a deeper level of surrender. That means even when you rise, even when the world starts paying attention, the private crushing continues. Because God isn't interested in just raising you up, He's interested in keeping you anchored. And nothing anchors you like remembering what it took to get here. Nothing humbles you like knowing how close you came to losing your mind, but didn't. Nothing grounds you like seeing how God carried you through the season that almost broke you. So I ask you, what if the breaking season you're in right now isn't a detour, but a divine setup? What if the pain you're feeling isn't a sign that God abandoned you, but a sign that He's invested in you? What if every unanswered prayer, every closed door, every delay is God's way of saying, I'm not done building you yet, because when the crowning comes, and it will, you won't be fragile, you won't be shallow, you won't be swayed by opinion or shaken by resistance. You'll be rooted, you'll be clear, you'll be dangerous to darkness, because you didn't just rise, you were refined by fire. And that kind of rise, that kind of authority, nobody can take that away from you. The crushing is holy, the delay is sacred, and if you're still standing after everything you've lost, it means the crown is already forming, not on your head, but in your spirit. The age of alignment. Why 30 is the divine threshold of destiny. There's a reason why 30 is the age when everything suddenly starts making sense, and not just in your mind, but in your being. It's the age when your inner world begins to click into place with the outer assignments God has been preparing for you all along. It's not a coincidence, it's not random, it's alignment, divine alignment. The unseen gears of your life, your pain, your preparation, your talents, your trials, they begin to turn in unison. And when they do, something incredible happens. The anointing activates, but not the immature anointing that seeks applause or platform. No, this is the mature anointing, the kind that hums with quiet authority, laced with the wisdom of the wilderness and the scars of survival. That's what 30 represents. It's not just a number. It's a threshold, a spiritual gateway, a marker that says you have been refined. Now you are ready. But why 30? Why not 20? Why not 25? Because in your 20s, you're still becoming. You're still shedding the false identities you inherited from culture, family, trauma, and ego. You're still unlearning the survival patterns that once kept you safe but now keep you small. You're still figuring out the difference between your desire and your destiny. And that takes time. Time to fail, time to heal, time to listen, time to grow roots so deep that when the winds of influence come, you don't get blown away by the attention you once craved. God holds back His strongest chosen ones until 30 because He knows that by then, the soil of your soul is finally fertile enough to sustain the weight of the seed He's about to place in you. Alignment isn't just about timing, it's about synchronization. It's when your spirit, mind, and body finally begin to move together under divine rhythm. It's when the lessons of your past no longer haunt you, they guide you. It's when the relationships you once clung to no longer match your vibration, so they fall away naturally, without drama. It's when the ambition that once drove you is replaced by clarity, not just about what you want, but about what you're here to give. That's when you know you've crossed into alignment. The noise quiets, the striving stops, and something deeper begins to lead. You start to notice that life isn't throwing you random challenges anymore. Everything becomes intentional. Every loss reveals a lesson. Every delay carries wisdom. Even your emotions begin to serve you instead of sabotage you. That's the sign of internal alignment. Spiritual maturity isn't about perfection, it's about integration. It's when your shadow and your light no longer fight each other. They dance, they work together. You stop running from your pain and instead allow it to become your teacher. That's what God waits for. That's why He withholds certain doors until you're 30. Not because you're being punished, but because He's ensuring you don't walk through them prematurely. And when alignment hits, you don't have to chase anymore. Doors begin to open without you knocking. People begin to find you without you searching. Opportunities begin to align with your values rather than pull you away from them. That's when you realize you were never delayed, you were being formed. And now, what used to feel like resistance feels like flow. The same things that overwhelmed you at 25 now roll off your back. The same patterns that once derailed you no longer hold power. The same insecurities that once paralyzed you have been replaced by peace. Not arrogance, not ego. Peace. That's how you know God has finished building your foundation. But here's the deeper truth. Alignment is not a reward, it's a responsibility, because once you've been aligned, you can't go back. You can't shrink again. You can't pretend you don't know what you know. You can't re-enter rooms that you've spiritually outgrown. You can't entertain relationships that speak to your wounds instead of your wisdom. Alignment demands integrity. It demands obedience. It demands that you walk in truth even when it's lonely, even when it's costly. Because now your life is no longer about your preference, it's about your purpose. And that purpose, it's not light, it's fire. And it needs a vessel that won't crack under pressure. So I ask you, have you felt the shift? Have you noticed how your soul doesn't tolerate the same noise anymore? How your spirit tugs at you when you try to settle? how your inner compass keeps pointing you towards something deeper, something higher, something truer. That is the age of alignment, calling you forward. That is God saying, now you're ready. Not because you're perfect, but because you're awake, because you finally see that your delays were not denials, they were divine design. Because you finally understand that your mess was not meaningless, it was the map. This is why 30 is sacred. It's not the end of your story, it's the unlocking of it. It's when the notes of your life finally harmonize. It's when your frequency becomes undiluted. It's when your yes becomes powerful and your no becomes holy. And from that place you begin to build, not for attention, not for applause, but for impact, for legacy, for eternity. The unstoppable rise. What happens when a chosen one enters divine timing? There's a moment when everything that once felt slow, stuck, or silent begins to move with divine momentum. It's not chaotic, it's not forced, it's orchestrated. There's a rhythm to it, a clarity, a calm power. This is what happens when a chosen one steps fully into divine timing. Not early, not late, right on time. And when it happens, it's not just a personal breakthrough, it's a spiritual event. Because when someone who's been through the crushing, the delay, the wilderness, and the alignment finally rises, the atmosphere around them shifts. They don't just walk into rooms, they change them. They don't just influence people, they awaken them. That's the power of divine timing. It turns the once overlooked into unstoppable forces of light. But the rise doesn't look like what most people expect. It doesn't always come with fame or followers. The world might not recognize it, but heaven does. The rise is when you start flowing in your true assignment without fear. It's when you speak and the words carry weight because they've been forged in silence, in pain, in truth. It's when what once triggered you now teaches others. When your scars become sacred tools, not sources of shame. It's when you're no longer trying to be important, you're being impactful. And there's a massive difference. The reason God delays the rise of His strongest chosen ones until 30 is because after all the breaking, refining, and aligning, you finally become safe to carry influence. You're no longer using your platform to heal your ego. You've already done that work in private. You're no longer chasing success. You've redefined success as obedience, presence, and eternal impact. You're no longer trying to prove your worth. You know who you are. And from that place of spiritual maturity, God can trust you with more people, more responsibility, more revelation, more reach. But not to build a kingdom around yourself, to build His. When you rise in divine timing, you don't need to strategize your way into rooms. You're sent. You don't need to force your way into conversations or platforms. You carry something, a frequency, a presence, a knowing that others feel even before you speak, because you're not just in your gift, you're in your grace. And grace opens doors that hustle never could. Grace brings you into spaces that your resume can't explain. Grace connects you with people who are looking for exactly what you've become, and it all begins to feel so natural, not because it's easy, but because it's aligned. But here's the truth. The rise isn't for your comfort, it's for your assignment. It's not about finally getting to relax. It's about finally stepping into the real work. The work of building, leading, healing, disrupting, awakening. You're not here to be liked, you're here to be light. And sometimes that means your rise will make some people uncomfortable. It will expose what they've been hiding. It will trigger what they haven't healed. But you won't shrink anymore to make others feel safe. You've already been through too much. You've already paid the price. Now it's time to walk in the fullness of who you are, without apology. The rise also comes with responsibility. You'll be tested again, but not in the same way. Now, the tests come in the form of opportunities that look good, but aren't God. Invitations that flatter the ego, but dilute the mission. Distractions dressed up as destiny. That's why, even in your rise, you'll need to stay anchored. You'll need to stay discerning. Because the enemy can't stop your rise, so he'll try to redirect it. He'll try to get you to settle for influence without intimacy with God, for visibility without integrity, for impact without inner peace. But you've come too far. You've been trained in the dark. You know better now. So I ask you this. If everything you've been through was leading to this moment, this rise, how would you show up? Who would you start becoming today, knowing that divine timing is no longer a distant hope, but a now reality? What would you finally release? What would you boldly pursue? What would you stop hiding? Because the truth is, your rise isn't just about you. It's about the people attached to your obedience. It's about the lives that will be changed because you said yes. It's about the ripple effect of your alignment. When you rise, others rise too. And maybe that's the most beautiful part of it all. Your rise isn't loud. It's light. It's not rushed. It's rooted. It's not shallow. It's sacred. And it's only beginning. Because when God delays the rise of His strongest chosen ones until 30, He's not just preparing a leader, He's preparing a movement. And now you're ready. The weights.